Few people understood why Clive Davis wanted to distance himself from Barry White, but some insiders knew it was linked to a shocking reality Barry had uncovered during his years in the music industry. In addition to his deep, soulful voice and romantic songs that became the soundtrack to millions of love stories, Barry White was also known for something else: his boldness. And this was the very trait Clive Davis despised the most. He didn't just see Barry as a remarkable artist. He saw him as a major threat. But what was the dark secret that made Barry White such a problem for Clive Davis? Let's talk about it.
Greed is a funny thing. Once you take a bite of it, it tends to turn on you and start eating you up. The industry was making enough money. The industry was growing fast enough. The industry was progressing enough.
Unlike other celebrities, Barry White never intended to enter the music industry. But when he became a part of it, he realized that no amount of fame could ever force him to sell his soul or integrity, especially not to powerful business figures like Clive Davis. Barry was always outspoken about how greed was the main reason many artists ended up down dark paths. He frequently tried to warn his fellow singers about it, but most were unwilling to listen. In addition to rumors about Clive Davis's interest in men, many believed he had an eye on the male artists he signed. But the story doesn't stop there. Much like Diddy, people questioned how so many artists under Clive Davis's wing mysteriously passed away. To avoid such a fate, Barry White took a bold step that few black artists would dare to do at the time. He created his own record label and made waves in the music industry. He wasn't just limited to writing, singing, and producing music. He also dabbled in acting and became one of the industry's biggest hustlers, reaping the rewards of his efforts. But when he won 2 Grammy Awards, circumstances took a tragic turn, leading to Barry's permanent silence, just as Clive Davis had wanted. Barry White, born on September 12, 1944, in Texas, was the son of Sad Marie Carter and Melvin White. However, his parents were never married, as Melvin had a wife from a previous relationship, which Barry's mother later discovered. When Barry found out the name of his biological father, he immediately replaced his mother's surname, Carter, on his birth certificate with White. But his story became even more interesting after that. Barry grew up in South Central Los Angeles, a place where the streets defined his identity. As the older brother of 2, he was always with his younger brother, Daryl. The two would get into trouble together and were arrested multiple times, especially Daryl, who was sent to juvenile detention at just 8 years old, a fact that led him further down a dangerous path. Tragically, Daryl paid the ultimate price for it. In a gang-related dispute, he was killed over a petty $20 fight with a neighbor. This event cast a long shadow over Barry's life. Reflecting on his brother's death, Barry once said, "No one could understand the bond between Daryl and me. I never understood what force pulled his soul one way and mine another." He mentioned this in his autobiography, Love Unlimited, Insights on Life and Love, admitting that music saved his life. However, despite his brother's death, Barry didn't immediately leave his old life behind. In fact, rumors circulated that he was still tangled in trouble. At just 16 years old, in 1960, he was arrested for stealing tires from a Cadillac and served 4 months in jail. But during his time in jail, something happened that changed his life forever. He heard Elvis Presley's "It's Now or Never" on the radio, and in that moment, something inside him snapped. Right then, he decided to leave the streets behind, realizing that it wasn't the way he wanted to live anymore.
Don't gloss over it. You got into a lot of trouble at one point, or your friends did. You hung around with a bad crowd.
That's true. That's very true.
What straightened you out?
The bad crowd. I guess when I turned 17, I looked around me, and everywhere I looked, it was depression. People who were just going around in circles. I just felt that it was a better way of life. I had to make a change or go down.
Life had reached a crossroads. Either I had to change my path or risk heading down the wrong one. 2 years later, on Barry White's 18th birthday, another significant event took place. Coincidentally, this day also marked the beginning of his final year in high school. But instead of attending class, Barry made a decision that would change his life forever. He dropped out of school and headed straight to Capitol Records headquarters in Hollywood. Standing across the street in front of the building, he stared at it for hours, as if imagining his future. It was commonly believed that Barry never formally learned music or songwriting, but his passion and hard work proved enough to carve a new path for him. The thing was, while Barry didn't have technical music knowledge at first, he started listening to his mother's classical record collection. Influenced by those songs, he would sit at the piano his mother bought for him, practicing by ear. Later, rumors began circulating that Barry White was the pianist featured on Jesse Belvin's song "Goodnight, My Love." One reason for this speculation was that both Jesse Belvin and Barry White were from the same neighborhood. As for Barry, the first time he noticed a major change in his voice was when he was just 13. Reflecting on this, he once said, "As a child, my voice was normal and thin. Then, as I grew, everything changed. My mom cried because she realized her son had become a man." His voice deepened day by day, and by the time he was 14, he began to notice that whenever he spoke to his mother, both of them were amazed by the transformation occurring inside him.
Voice actually changed.
I woke up one morning when I was 14 and
You woke up?
I spoke to my mother, and I scared both of us.
After spending time in jail, Barry White permanently left the gang life behind. In fact, there was once a time when he was accused of murder, but he was later proven innocent. According to him, 1960 marked the true beginning of his music career, and he started singing with various groups. He had worked with small independent labels in Los Angeles before, but he had already released Too Far to Turn Around by that time. Barry made the risky decision to record several hit singles under his own name, especially during the early years of the 1960s, with vocal groups like the Atlantics and the Majestics backing him up. For his biggest musical inspirations, he named James Cleveland, Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin, and Marvin Gaye. Just like Marvin Gaye, Barry White didn't have a strong relationship with his father. In 1965, Barry produced Feel All Right, a song by the Bel Cantos, which was released on Downey Records. In 1966, he also produced Man Ain't Nothing and I Don't Need It. But Barry White wasn't just singing. He was also discovering new artists, something that rivaled Clive Davis. By 1967, Barry had discovered Felice Taylor and arranged her hit song I Feel Love Comin' On, which quickly became a hit in the UK. In 1969, Forward Records of Los Angeles signed Barry White as a producer, a part of the Transcontinental Entertainment Corporation. Just 3 years later, Barry took another big step by forming his own girl group, which he had discovered himself and named Love Unlimited. This was a significant achievement for Barry, as it was reminiscent of the famous Motown girl group The Supremes, established by Berry Gordy, which had a major influence on the music industry. Under Berry Gordy, Motown Records became a music empire that produced legendary artists like Stevie Wonder, Diana Ross, Marvin Gaye, Smokey Robinson, and The Supremes. Motown made African-American music mainstream and helped break down racial barriers. But Barry White was focused on carving out his own place in the industry. In 1973, he created the Love Unlimited Orchestra, which was essentially a 40-piece band for his girl group. However, Barry's ambitions were even bigger. That same year, he released Love's Theme, which he had written and performed with the orchestra. The song reached #1 on the Billboard pop charts, solidifying Barry's reputation as a musical genius. But the story didn't end there. By the mid-1970s, Barry was looking to work on a new act, a solo male artist. When demo tracks for this project were being recorded, music industry executives who heard them told Barry to release the songs himself. At first, he hesitated, but eventually he agreed and went behind the mic as a solo artist for the first time. He decided to write and record new songs, which eventually turned into a full album. His song, I'm Gonna Love You. Just a Little More Baby became a massive hit, reaching #1 on the Billboard R&B charts and #3 on the Billboard pop charts, remaining in the top 40 for weeks. After 6 consecutive years of success, Barry White made another bold move. In 1979, he left 20th Century Records and launched his own record label, Unlimited Gold, under CBS Columbia Records. Everything was going in Barry's favor. His career was on the rise while other record labels were struggling.